So yes, my name is Eng Lim, E-N-G-L-I-M. If you don't mind going to the next slide, please. Just want to acknowledge that we are meeting today on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. All right, thank you. Next slide, please. So that's my name, my full name, Eng Hua Lim. The surname is Lim, very short. First name is Eng. So happens to be also an abbreviation for an engineer, which... And I don't know why my father named me Eng. Perhaps he wants me to be an engineer, not a doctor. So otherwise I'll be Lim, you know. Anyway, the presentation today is sort of subdivided into more or less 4 key areas, as you can see there. One, I think Councillor Pierce has mentioned about the mobility and road safety strategy. So just want to talk a little bit on that. And then the second topic is about safe systems. Sort of some of the earlier speakers talk about we can't do it alone, so we need everyone to be part of it, and that's why we look at it from a systems approach rather than ad hoc approach, right? And then the third key topic is about what council can do. We can do a few things, but we can't do everything. And the second last point is what community can do, because that's what about partnership. And one of our council values, or top 5 values, is working together. So that's in that same spirit of working together. And last, of course, question and answers, which I think there'll be a separate session with the panel. All right, next please. So the mobility and road safety strategy was actually quite recently adopted by council. It took about, 2.5 years, that was before I joined, partly because COVID and all that. But when I joined, there was halfway through the process of getting this document together on the mobility and road safety strategy. And as what Councillor Pierce has mentioned earlier in the prologue session, there was a lot of community interest in ensuring that this is not one of the many generic road safety strategies that other councils have that only looks at human strategies, human safety in terms of the strategy itself, but also look at wildlife. So that's the reason why it took a bit more time to put it all together. You can read all about it. It's about, I think, 50 pages, not too much. It's almost like a bedtime story. It's on the web page. You know, because if you read a story, probably, 50 pages. Lots of pictures. It's actually graphically designed, not just words and all that. So that's the front cover. So it's a 10-year strategy that will be reviewed, at some point in the future. It has some action plan as part of this strategy. It was adopted only towards the end of last year, just before Christmas, the last meeting of the last council meeting in 2023. So next slide, please. So what are the principles that we have in this mobility and road safety strategy? I can put this presentation on our council webpage and you can download. And yes, I mean, if you want to take a photograph, not a problem. Happy to do that. There are a few key guiding principles on this strategy, which is basically the 3 wordings there: Vision Zero, Safe System, and Movement and Place. Yeah. So Vision Zero is basically the international so-called standard that all countries should aspire to zero roadkill for humans. But what we are also added to it is the 5th strategic theme that specifically covers what council can do in terms of wildlife toll, road tolls. Okay? And the second one in green is the safe system, which I will come to later. And the third one is about movement and place, which is a Victorian document that talks about how road functions. Road is not just a place, a piece of infrastructure for you to travel from point A to point B. You also serve as a place function. So let's say a same road that cuts through a Riddles Creek. When the road goes through in the town center of Riddles Creek, it changes its function. It's no longer just a road, it's also a place, because there'll be schools in front of it, there'll be a police station, there'll be people walking across the main road to get to the train station and all that. So the road will be treated very differently compared to a road that is going to leave Riddles Creek and then go to the next town. Yeah? So that's the very important aspects of that road function. Okay? And the last point I want to make on this slide is basically similar to the road safety approach for humans, we need a multi-pronged approach for wildlife safety as well. Yeah? And that's one of the little signs we show there. Please slow down for wombats and kangaroos wildlife crossing. And the rule is looking at us, say, why are you not slowing down? See, the rule is telling us why the driver is not slowing down, giving us a stern look. All right? Okay. So I mentioned earlier, there were 5 strategic themes. So theme 1, quickly, this is not the focus of today, but just for everyone's benefit, if you haven't seen it, the theme 1 is about safety on high-risk rural roads. We all know about that because, as many of you have mentioned earlier, the cars or vehicles are traveling at 100 kilometers an hour or even higher sometimes. The second one is about safety and mobility in and around townships. We have Gisborne, we have Kyneton, we have Riddles Creek, and so on, Newham. The third one is about movement and place, and that's why when we look at any new application, we are not just looking at it from a land use point of view, but also from a movement and place point of view, to make sure that any future development takes into consideration how humans travel, as well as how it will not affect, or at least minimize the impact on wildlife safety, okay? The fourth one is about user preference. This is about how do we make that behavior change. I think a few presenters, especially Kylie, the last one with she mentioned about behavior modification or behavior adaptation. And the last one, of course, we talk about wildlife safety, which I will go into a bit more detail in the next slide. Okay, so what is the safe system approach? As I mentioned earlier, it's about shared responsibility. And there are 5 pillars, which is more or less highlighted in bold there, about what it means in order to have a safe system approach, yeah? The first one is about having safe road users. So I think there was some comment about some drivers going too fast, not mindful, not looking out for pedestrian, not looking out for cyclists, not looking out for someone on the horse trotting away at the side of the road, for example, on a pony, or a wombat crossing the road. So this is about behavior change, and how do we do education? How do we make that shift in behavior modification for drivers? And all of you have a part to play, because I know all of you are very passionate. That's why you're spending 3 hours with us today, right? The second one, which I think there was some talk about safe speed. I think the 3 other speakers talk about safe speed. So this is what I'm going to go into about speed limit reduction, which I'll come to about the challenges we face and how we go about it. The third one, which is a hot topic these days, about safe roads. In the context of wildlife safety, there was some other presentation about having underpasses, overpasses, rope crossing between trees so that a wombat or koala can travel across the road safely. Right? There was a talk just now, I think someone commented on it, right? I actually went to a rope making class, I think it was organized by Tanya's team. And Simon, yes? And they actually tell you how to make a rope crossing so that the animals can travel safely over the tree without going over the road, all right? And the fourth one is about safe vehicles. So for those of you who are lucky enough to buy a new car today, you see that the car has what we call ADAS, Advanced Driver Assistance System. It almost can drive itself. It tells you when you veer off the line marking, it beeps you. If you're getting too close to another vehicle in the front, it gives you a warning and say, slow down, don't tailgate. If you didn't do your head turn, which my son is doing his driving classes these few weeks, because he's already reached an age that he should be taking a driver's license, he did do a head check. Wow, there's always this blind spot monitoring on new vehicles that gives you a little glow, yellow beep, or a flash that says, there's a vehicle in your blind spot you can't see, but don't shift your lane, right? So what it means in terms of technology for wildlife? Well, what I'm hoping to do, and I think there's a lot of clever people in the vehicle or the automotive design space, is that nowadays vehicles can detect pedestrian. If you look at some of the, I'm not advertising for Volvo, but if you look at one of the more recent Volvo advertisements, there's a nice lady driving in a car in the city, and then there's a kid that runs across the road, and the vehicle just stops by itself, and then the lady says, oh my God. There was an ad there. I think it was not recent ad, I think probably last year's advertisement. So what if we can tell our car manufacturers, well, we don't have one in Australia, unfortunately, but we can tell other manufacturers around the world that instead of just detecting pedestrian or cyclists jumping in front of the vehicle, what about a rule? What about a wombat? What about a koala, Technologies today in AI and in machine learning can actually train the camera that is installed right in the center of your behind your windscreen, in the front windscreen. It detects all those beeping noises that sometimes annoy drivers. It can do the same, detecting a pedestrian, a cyclist, why not an animal crossing the road? I'll put it out there that at some point in the future, we will get there, right? If we had enough grassroots push to tell car manufacturers that if you can design a car or a vehicle for the safety of pedestrians and cyclists, why not an animal? Isn't it? Well, I'm not a researcher, I'm an engineer in council. But we can write letters, which I'll come to later. All right? And the last one is important because many of you are in this space already. Post-crash care. Similar to human safety after an accident, what do? First responders, right? Paramedics. Obviously, hopefully take you to secure the patient or the person first before going to the hospital. That's where you come in. Not council, but you guys. Wildlife Victoria has done an amazing job. With a bit more funding, they can do more, of course. Yeah. That's what we mean by post-crash care. I think both our councillors here are in the medical field. They know all about post-crash care. So happen my daughter is also going to be HMO soon, so she will be telling me more about this post-crash care. But it's important that all of you understand that. So if you happen to see an animal injured on the roadside, what can you do as an individual to help that animal? Just like how you can help a person as well, right? So it's the same thing. It's a life. And we're all pro-life, I'm sure, right? Okay, so again, we are talking about importance of working together. So we are talking about partnering, collaboration with Wildlife Victoria, experts like Dr. Kylie, and also other rural councils. I'll come to that point later. Next slide, please. So, drilling down to the details of what council can do, there's a few things we can do. And when I first migrated to Australia in 2015, one of the fun stuff that I realized is Australia has very unique animals. You know that already. You have animals that no other country has it. No other country has kangaroos, no other country has platypus, wombats, echidna, and you can name a whole list of animals that never existed anywhere else around the world. So Australia is rather unique in that sense. So we also know that their natural habitat is under threat. No thanks to who? Humans, us. So what does it mean in terms of implication? We are responsible. And as people who are responsible, and we need to do the right thing on our own, right? Now, we are working very closely, our environmental team, looking at vegetation control to cut back some of the things so that at least along the road, the driver should be able to see as much as possible what is approaching the center of the road, an animal just waiting at the verge, if there's enough space in terms of cutting back some of the bushes and trees. We are not removing trees, we are trying to cut back some of the branches so that at least the area or the tunnel vision is wider and broader, okay? The hot topic, reducing speed on council road. As you know, I'll come to a slide later on, we are dealing with speed. In the case of human safety, you can imagine that a car hits you at 30 kilometers or the car hits you at 50 kilometers. You can easily understand which scenario is worse off, right? It doesn't need a scientist to tell you that. But what we are trying to do is to advocate a lower speed limit for all unsealed rural roads. That's where I think the biggest threat is to wildlife safety, right? And there is a little guideline which I put here, but I'll go to a bit more detail in the next slide. There is a document called Speed Zoning Technical Guidelines that was revised. This is version 2, you can't see it, in December 2021. When I was working in the previous council, it was version 1 in 2019, which I implemented for that council. 93% of those roads all become 40 kilometers an hour. 93%, except for all the main highways that obviously it's not managed by council. So all the other council roads become 40 kilometers. It's an urban council, so it's slightly different from Macedon Ranges, but the process is still the same. Okay? The third point is working closely, again, working together with insurance company, environmental groups, all of you, wildlife group, Wildlife Victoria, about data. Because Kylie mentioned about data. Data is important because we need to measure how we can use your money, your ratepayers' money, effectively and most efficiently. Because otherwise, you'll be saying, Macedon Rangers, use your money inefficiently and not spend it in the right place. We are not only going to spend money on wildlife, we need to fix the potholes on our roads, we need to fix old bridges that are built 100 years ago, and other things. And we need to fix our drainage because whenever it rains, there's water. So there are a lot of things we need to fix. So we need to use your money in the most effective and most scientific manner so that you get the best value or the best return of the money invested in a particular project. Okay? So we need data, and as what Kylie had mentioned earlier, we need data before we do something, and we need to collect data after we do something so that we can make a determination whether that project or that trial or that technology works or not. Okay? And the second last point is trialing innovative technologies like virtual fencing and other things. And I'll talk slightly a little bit more. And the last one is again about education, about signage. I think that was well covered by other earlier presenters, so I won't go too much into that. Next slide, please. So let's talk about speed limit reduction. Who manages speed limit decisions? Tell me. On council roads. Yes, not council. Many residents that came to us say, oh, just reduce the speed. I say, I love to. I love to. I will be the first person to say, I love to. I did that in my previous council where every single urban road, it is an urban council, not here, not similar to this, every single road that is residential is all 40. And because of that, more people are walking, more people are cycling, even without bicycle lane. Because if the cars are going slowly, you can cycle happily at the same speed as the car. And in urban streets, you don't have wide lanes. It's the old system, old narrow street. So it's only a single lane. So you can't have bicycle lanes, right? So that's what I meant. But in the case, this is an extract of that front cover I showed you in the previous slide. There are just two tables that I want to highlight. The first table is this big table on the right that tells you when can you apply to Vic roads, when can you implement certain speed limits. So in rural environment, on unsealed rural roads, the default is 100 kilometers, which is right almost at the second last bottom. Obviously, on the corner highway, I know you can travel at 110, which is the speed limit you probably used to on the highway, right? But on rural roads, we can see that rural roads, blah, 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 100 kilometers. What we are trying to do to the Department of Transport of Vic Road is because our councillors have adopted the new mobility and road safety strategy, we are going to advocate that all council roads in Macedon Ranges should at least be reduced to 80 kilometers. Somebody will say, why not pick a number, 50? Well, at this point in time, we cannot. Simply because the table tells us 50 is applied to local street, if you can read, it's kind of small. Local streets in built-up areas, urban and rural. So if you're thinking about Morford's Lane, for example, I think you mentioned, thank you, Patrick. It's rural, but it's not built up because there are only 5 properties there. So I can't go to DOT and ask for 50. What I can do for Morford's Lane is to go at 80. At least we are getting somewhere. We're not going at 100. And even if you get at 80, does it mean all drivers will drive at 80? No. So that's the challenge. We can do something, but we can't do everything.
Could I just make the point?
Yeah.
Council's done the road survey of speeds, and it's the average speed when they did the survey in 2021 or 2022 was 80 kilometres an hour. So some are doing closer to 100 kilometres an hour, and some, like me, doing 40 kilometres an hour.
Yeah, so that's the law of averages, as you know.
It's only an average.
Yes. So what we do in survey is we don't just do the average. What we do is, as you probably remember, we do the 85th percentile. For those who study and pay attention to the math teacher in high school, the 85th percentile is a number that 85% of those sample data is below or equal to. So what it means is that there will be another 50% that sits above that magic number. But it's a good measure that majority, it reflects the majority of drivers are traveling at that 85th percentile speed. There will be all the naughty drivers, I call them naughty drivers, that travel above the speed of that number, that small group of people, 15%, okay? Ideally, I would like to get 100% of people behaving themselves. But similar to COVID, not everyone get a jab, right? So we can't force. It's a democratic country. And we can, however, seek our partners in enforcement, which in this case will be the Victorian Police, to help enforce when we have enough data to show that there's a higher percentage of people traveling at a certain speed that we do not want to see. Yeah, we can do that because we can measure the speed, right? We need data to be able to justify that. Okay, so moving on to the next slide.
Yeah, and I'll just give you a time.
Yes.
5
Yeah.
more minutes?
5 more minutes? Yeah, almost there. So we need data-driven approach because every investment we make is your money, correct? So we are mindful of that. And I just want to point to black spot because black spot approach is basically looking at funding any council project for road safety improvement, but for humans, okay, for people. And the funding is possible when, if you read there, it's kind of small print, if there is a benefit cost ratio of at least 2 to 1. What does that mean? That means if we do something that costs $100,000, we should be able to demonstrate to the state government or the federal government that the benefit we gain of spending $100,000 is actually $200,000 or more. Okay? That's one measurement. The other one is there should be a history of at least 3 casualty crashes over 5 years on that location. But this is for humans, human safety. What I'm trying to reach out to those decision making is, can we have something similar for wildlife safety? The numbers will change, of course. You can say benefit cost ratio of 3 to 1. You can say 5 kangaroos over a certain period of time, killed or injured or whatever. They can decide. We can have that conversation, right? And you can have that conversation with the people in power too, isn't it? Right? Okay, so moving on. So what can the community do? This is almost like a JFK saying. If you know what JFK said, some of you are probably not born when JFK is around. I so happened to be a baby at that time. What JFK said is, ask not what the country can do for you, but what you can do for the country. So this is, again, I'm asking you and appealing to you, ask not what council can do for the animals, but what you can do for the animals too. What you can do for animals, be mindful as a driver, obviously. Drive to the condition of the road. When we have a speed limit of 80, the meaning is speed limit. That's the top end of the speed. You can choose to travel at 60, 50 on a road that has 80 kilometers speed limit. Am I right? Yes, you can. And on the rural roads, there's not too many vehicles behind you that will tailgate if you go a bit slower. Especially when? Which time of the day I think you should be driving slower than usual? Dusk or dawn. The research shows that, I think Wildlife Victoria will confirm this, the most critical period for animals out on the road is dusk, not dawn. If you have to make a choice of how you change the driver behavior, dusk is the worst time. And we actually sent a letter to the resident in Moffat's Lane, which I reproduce here. What are the things that residents can do to minimize the kill, okay? Again, we are talking about education, awareness campaign, talk to your neighbors, wildlife rescue, participate in wildlife rescue, volunteer your time because it is a voluntary organization. So volunteer your time when you can because we're all passionate about animals. I'm sure all of you have pets at home. Could be a cat, could be a dog, rabbit, snake, wombats, lizards. My daughter has friends who have all those animals. That's how I know because I go to their house and say, oh, that's a snake. Oh, okay, it's a pet. Okay, all right. All right. Forums like this. And I think the key point is the last one, which is about positive engagement. how we can, as a community, do positive engagement with council, with councillors, with the local MP, with the state politicians, mainly around funding. We need to be able to get some funding to be able to implement certain things. Okay, next slide, please. That's it. Thank you very much.